Hello everybody, Diablo 4, it's coming out soon. I finished playing the early access open beta, aka the closed beta at home, and here's my verdict. My time with the beta was an 8 out of 10, but for the full release, Diablo 4 is looking like a 6 out of 10. Before you move on over to the comment section, allow me to substantiate. I have around 5,000 hours across Path of Exile and Diablo 3, but mostly PoE, and have played pretty much every other action RPG under the sun. Grim Dawn, Last Epoch, Chronicon, Victor Van Wolfson, you name it, I've probably played it. Alright, there's your context. Now for D4, starting with what it does right. First, and most importantly, the combat. I mean, did anyone expect the combat to miss the mark? Diablo 3 still, to this day, has the most fluid and engaging combat out of any ARPG on the market. All Blizzard has to do was not screw it up, and they haven't. Weaving attacks in while sidestepping and dashing out of danger leads to a slightly different, slower pace of combat than most Diablo players know, but the sense of satisfaction that you know and love is there all the same. The animations and sound design are top notch. Every move you make is fluid, aside from the occasional melee, name lock, targeting crap that any ARPG enthusiast knows and loves. This is why we spin to win, devs. But no real complaints about the flow of combat overall. The success of combat is also large in part due to the abilities that you use. They're all interesting enough in their base forms and grow more so when pairing certain passive points and upgrades together. Going from 25 to 100 points with the game's full release excites me enough to start mentally planning a few different builds now here in the beta. However, the skill and passive progression isn't all fine and dandy, but I'll get to that in just a minute. Speaking of combat, the actual things that you're fighting are also done well. Monsters are both fun to hit and fun to be hit by. My only real complaint would be the effects of slows and the duration of stuns. A 3-second stun has no place in Act 1. I get that it's part of intentionally slowing down the pace of the game, but come on, 3 seconds? Finally, the world itself. There's plenty of variety to be seen just in Act 1, and I imagine this carries over to the other acts as well. Quality, when it comes to world building, has always been Blizzard's strong suit, so like the combat, no surprises here. Those are the pros of Diablo 4. Now, here come the cons. First and foremost, monster density. You know what? Slap the dungeons here as well. Screw it. The number of monsters you encounter and the places in which you encounter them are by far my biggest issues with Diablo 4. While going through the main quests in Act 1, there are times when you're spending 20 or 30 seconds without fighting anything. If this were any other genre of game, that wouldn't be a big issue, but this is an action RPG, not an RPG with action. An action RPG. It's right there at the start of the name. Yes, I understand that this issue will be alleviated some upon the full release with the addition of the mount system, but again, it's an action RPG. There really is no excuse for players to not be in perpetual combat outside of the town hubs. Furthermore, this monster density problem exacerbates the overall issues with the dungeons. Dungeons are the end-game activities in Diablo 4. These bad boys are what's replacing rifts and greater rifts. You're going to want to make a serious mental note of that. We'll come back to it momentarily. Not only are these same monster density issues of the overworld present, almost every other aspect of the dungeons are also in need of some serious work. The footage you've been watching is of a dungeon, and I can practically guarantee you that what you're seeing is reflective of every other dungeon in the game, not just Act 1, all of them. But how do I know this? I've only played the beta. Surely the full release will offer more variety and overall content and thus render my definitive conclusions upon these systems and the beta invalid. Well, let's just say that I did some basic research from the people who have been playing and testing the rest of Diablo 4, not just the early game, and their conclusions mirror my own experiences that I'm about to describe. The best way I can summarize the issues I have with dungeons is that I'm already bored with them after running them for 1 hour. A single hour. That's all it took. Yes, the core of an action RPG is the combat and the progression. The zones in which you traverse and the enemies that you kill are simply vessels to experience those two things. I understand that. But what if the endgame was more than just a way to kill a bunch of stuff? What if the endgame itself had its own progression tied to it, aside from just fighting monsters with bigger numbers? Regardless, Diablo 4's dungeons aren't even a way to kill a bunch of stuff. They're a way to kill some stuff, but mainly just walk around and pull levers, collect goopy goppy guck, find keys and open doors, and finally kill one big boy at the end of it all. If you think that slapping on some increasingly negative modifiers and calling it a day is going to change that core experience, you are absolutely slamming down the copium, bro. Every single dungeon is a circle where you choose either left or right at the start, end up walking around the entire zone anyway, then have to backtrack halfway across the entire zone to reach the boss room because of where the necessary items to open the boss door are located. I don't know how they did it, but Blizzard actually managed to make an endgame less engaging than rifts. Rifts, where the sole objective is to kill as many monsters as possible in the least amount of time to gain the most reward. You literally just show up, slaughter, loot, leave, repeat. That is far more engaging than these dungeons. But even if fundamental changes come through to Diablo 4's in-game systems before full release, there exists yet another longevity problem, the loot. Like Diablo 3, item base types are essentially non-existent, meaning the random stats on the item are the only relevant part, not the item itself. Okay, that's fine, not ideal for modern ARPGs, but it's passable assuming that the modifiers that can roll are actually in-game. Wait. Oh, I see where he's going with this. Now, don't get me wrong, the affixes on gear aren't terrible, just not great. This is especially true when considering that legendaries in Diablo 4 are not actually legendary items. You and I would probably refer to them as epic items, rares with an additional random modifier slapped on top. The legendaries in Diablo 4 are not the same as in D3 or as uniques are in Path of Exile, which are entirely separate items from the normal randomly rolled pool with custom built affixes. Those items do still exist in Diablo 4, but are now called unique items. On top of that, there exist two additional rarities, Sacred and Ancestral. But do you see the problem here? Why switch the naming convention at all? Why not just keep calling legendaries legendaries and then call these things epics or something? It truly makes no sense. For the vast majority of RPG players, uniques and legendaries are synonymous, so why bother changing that? Anyway, this is more of a nitpick than anything. Let me get back to my original point. The affixes rolled on gear are at best. More damage to close range enemies, less damage taken from distant enemies, +1 level to X skill, basic skill damage, core skill damage, armor, life, speed, crit, etc., etc. Now, there is some variation in the base type of items. For example, I've seen boots with +1 dash charges, and I've seen boots with 40% movement speed after dashing. I've seen pants with movement speed on potion use when low life, and I've seen pants with increased health recovered by potion at low life. But putting everything together still really just boils down to, does it have more green arrow? If the answer is yes, then it's almost definitely an upgrade. And I get it, Diablo is and always has been the more beginner-friendly, approachable ARPG, but I'd like to see a little more variation and depth tossed in aside from overt damage increases and decreases. And finally, speaking of depth, the skill and passive tree systems. They're actually the same thing. You gain 1 skill point per level and have to choose between spending it on a passive character upgrade like speed or health, or spending it to increase the power of one of your active skills. This is a pretty big change from Diablo 3, where the skills would automatically unlock new runes and progress as you leveled up, and your only real choice was once you start getting Paragon levels, choosing Paragon levels. But I actually like Diablo 4's system, and I'm excited to see how it shapes up once we're given more than 25 points to spend. What I'm worried about is how long the excitement will last. The depth. This is an action RPG. The two pillars of any good ARPG are its combat and its progression. Progression is much harder to nail because it encompasses all facets of the game, namely the loot and the skill systems. I've already covered my issues with the loot, so for the skills, you basically only get 2 options to play a given skill. 3 if you count the base version. That's right, each skill only has 2 upgrades. Not upgrade paths, upgrades. As in the things that change the potential playstyle, yeah, you get 2 of those. It's either this one or that one. Which one do you want? Sure, you can pump points into the skill itself to improve the effectiveness, but I'm talking about variety here. 2? Really? That's it? On top of that, you only have 6 ability slots in total. That's not a good sign for anyone who's not a first-time ARPG player. Again, Diablo has always been the simpler game. I get that, but who? Look, at the end of the day, Diablo 4 is shaping up to just be more Diablo, and that's why I don't have the highest hopes for its release. If you played Diablo 3, you understand exactly what I mean. On release, everyone's going to be playing it and everyone's going to be having a good time. Then, after about 100 hours or so, the people that are more experienced with ARPGs are going to move on and then only come back for the next big update, be it a new season or a DLC. Then, those players are going to repeat the process only to spend less and less time with the game each cycle, as the overall depth of the game just isn't there compared to other modern ARPGs. Therefore, Diablo 4 will quickly become Diablo 3 regardless of the shift in the tonality of the combat flow, unless some serious measures are taken to bolster the progression systems and to keep more than the most average of average players around. And, oh yeah, I almost forgot. Screw the mobile game challenge reward collection UI and the freaking text of the items on the ground. Like, what in the world is this? Does this scream Diablo to anybody? But hey, let me know what you think. I'm not the most Diabloist of Diablo fans, but I love action RPGs as a whole, so I'd love to hear some other perspectives out there. Thanks for watching.